Welcome to the Symphony of Realities podcast, boldly taking you where no podcast has gone before. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation as you settle into your X, Y, and Z coordinates within time and space. Here are your hosts, Christopher Anatra and Sean Bond.
Sean, we did it again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Episode number 3. Have you settled into your X, Y, and Z coordinates in space and time?
I found myself in a weird position. I'm in Iceberg, as you can see.
Yes. Asgard. Is that an actual photograph of Asgard?
Absolutely. How did you know?
I thought they have photography in Asgard, of course.
It's leaked. We got it.
Awesome.
Tech, whatever.
Well, today we have a very interesting show. We're going to be a little bit all over the place with what we talk about. We're going to talk about our final thoughts from the last episode of Loki that we saw. And then we're going to talk about some other things that fall into the Mandela Effect category that are kind of interesting. So the first part is we talk about what's going on in our lives lately. So Sean, I'd like to introduce you and your website called the PsionicLeague. What's been going on with you lately?
A lot. Trying to get everything up and running for intake of memberships and video products for courses so people can learn the skills. How about you? What have you been getting into?
I've had Atlantis on my mind a lot, and it's really interesting because I've been noticing that I don't know if it's just like me that's noticing it, but it seems like people are talking more about Atlantis. And is Atlantis ready to come more into our memory and our awareness? And I think it is. And getting all kinds of really interesting downloads about Atlantis that I'm really excited to share. And tomorrow I'm filming part of this Atlantis series that I'm working on, and then that'll be edited, and probably a week or two later I'll have the first part on there. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to it. Yeah, on my mind as well. What have you tuned into of recent that you're willing to spoil? Any little things?
Yeah, there's been a lot of it's led me into these different directions. Part of it led me into General Patton, of all people, right? General Patton, George Patton of World War II, who died a very mysterious death right after the war ended. Information about him that's related to that. Actually, he was very outspoken about reincarnation. I never realized that. So he was kind of already on the edge. And then I saw a timeline regarding him in Antarctica, where instead of Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica, Patton went there. And, Patton does things in a big way, so to speak, like D-Day, the Normandy invasion and all that. And he handled that a different way. Things about a 10-year party in Atlantis that people don't really talk about that I know of. And then that led me to something called the Serapeum, which is from Egypt. It's these 100-ton, they're made of solid granite. They look like coffins. They don't know the purpose for them. And I'm like, why are these Serapeum coming into my awareness? And then how that was related to this 10-year party in Atlanta. So basically,
how big are the coffins?
They say their original purpose was to put the bodies of the Apis bulls inside of, which doesn't make any sense because they're huge. They're 100 tons. Just the cover is 40 tons. And
how big would you say?
I don't know the size. Huge. You could probably have a dance party in one of them. They're really a small day.
The sacred dance parties of Egypt.
And they were so the precision is to the micron, which means once that thing was sealed, nothing's getting out. And how did the ancient Egyptians actually have that technology? So then that led me to something else, which I won't give any more spoiler alerts, but it's funny how one thing leads to another. like when I did the Quantum Businessman episode on time traveling babies, like the babies that were coming in from the infant incubator shows, like it's just like how one thing leads to another. So it's going to be a cool thing. People, you're not going to be able to know where this is going, which is what I like about it. So
Right.
like Loki, right? It was hard to like figure out like where they were going with all this, and now we kind of know for sure because episode 6 completed. And yes, that's going to be the primary thing we talk about today.
Wonderful. Yeah. How would you like to start into that subject? Lots
well, you know what I think we should do is we only have about, I think, 5 slides in this presentation. So maybe we'll run everybody through the slides so they know what we're going to talk about. And then we'll go back to the Loki slide.
And everyone listening, go ahead and ask your questions. We're going to be more proactive with that. And feel free to go into, especially like with topics and stuff. But yeah, feel free.
Yeah, definitely. Because sometimes we get distracted when we're talking, and so we'll try to like pay attention to your questions. So we're going to talk about Kang the Conqueror, which came up in the final episode. So we're going to talk about what's going on with that, some soft disclosure that we kind of gleaned from that. And then on the next slide, we talk about 2 Mandela effects, Migaloo and Iceberg, which are, a lot of people already heard about Migaloo because it was spoken about at least with the last Mandela Effect conference show. We talked about Migaloo, who is a white humpback whale. And now there's Iceberg, his friend, who's a white golden orca that's appeared on the timeline. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about something that I never heard of before. They're called Judas Goats. And Sean, you were telling me about this last night. And I'm like, what the heck is a Judas Goat? I've never heard of that concept before. So we're going to get into that. To me, it's a Mandela effect, but they're a thing, right? And we'll go. The next slide is about, we've known for quite a while now that there's actually 13 planets in the solar system. Just going to touch on that briefly. We got the 8 classical planets and then the 5 dwarf planets, including Ceres, which is in the asteroid belt, which was discovered in 1801. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. And then the next slide, this blew my mind. I think this is the final thing we talk about. The Dale car. Have you ever heard of the Dale car?
No. I mean, not.
Well,
probably not the same thing as what you're bringing up. No.
Yeah. So this was like, and I mentioned this to my father because the Dale car was in 1974, and he's kind of a car nut. And every time I see him, we watch a Motor Trend episode or something. So I asked him, Dad, have you ever heard of this car called the Dale that came out or was supposed to come out in the 70s when we had the big gas crisis? And he didn't know what I was talking about. So we're going to talk about that too. That'll be the final thing. That might be our most fun part of the whole podcast that we're doing. So
the duckbill part of that car seems weird in design. But
yeah.
You could like sit like 2 kids in it and it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
And you want to.
Put 1 kid on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get into that too, because it turned out to be, it's called the con of the century. That no one's ever heard of. So we'll cover that. But let's jump back and let's go into our Kang the Conqueror slide. And the first bullet point there is called the Time Tree of Light. Well, first of all, Sean, tell us, because you are our resident expert in all things Marvel, at least as far as I'm concerned. Out of the 2 of us, you're the expert anyway. Tell us about Kang the Conqueror.
Appreciate that. I'm not really much of an expert. Just track of their good stuff and their shit. And they shouldn't be doing, but but yeah. And the comic industry used to love it. Now it's kind of like not aligning with the fans as much, unfortunately, as it should be. But that's just making an opportunity for comic book artists to come out. You should. Now's the time, buddy. If you can get out, I'll make your good story, and then people want to hear it. Time Tree of Light. The something concept. It was beautiful when it was put in the show. It's something I actually have seen like a long time ago, and like I just like tune into visions and daydream constantly as one of my senses.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. Can we pull up that graphic of the timeline?
Yeah, and
Just while you're talking about, so people can
Sure.
visually see that time tree of light.
Sure, and yeah, so I saw that in many visions at very high depth as well as dreams, and you can kind of see this as the brain, the neuron, the synaptic pathways, the motions of the universe, how the stars like spawn from each other, the way tracks of all decisions and choice points, and lives, incarnations, the tree of life, the tree of death, the tree of light, tree of time, a lot of different things can be represented in tree form, and as the micro, macro, as above, so below, and roots of all the foundation of everything, and then all light and all experience and energy branching off from each other in the whole electromagnetic spectrum and beyond. So that including the filing perception of time and all timeline potentials of the multiverse. Well, and let's start with the universe as it is, and all the similar universes that branch off of that, and then the bubbles of reality going down in like from universe, galaxies to solar system to Earth to the individual, and individual timeline branches, and then even going past the universe into the multiverse and then the ultraverse and beyond time and space, and any other way you want to describe the bubbles of conception that came before. But yeah, great visualization, and people can tune into this operating system and make it organized, and then see what is the meaning behind it, build upon it, see maintain awareness on their branches of their own tree, and then go forward in maintenance past that level if they want to make it better. And yeah, I don't know if we're going to talk about it in another slide, but his speech was quite like philosophically vexing for, I would say, for people, like, because he kind of made it to where you had almost no free will in your choice. Oh, you can either choose to kill me or let this happen, and then quite convincing in that. But personally, I kind of go against what he says. How about you?
Yeah, I think I forgot to say, spoiler alerts. So if you haven't seen like all the, especially episode 6, we're kind of going to be giving spoilers. What's interesting is I think we saw this character Kang coming, right? We had all the little signs. We saw the image of the Sphinx, and his ship was called the Sphinx. Sean, tell us a little bit about who Kang the Conqueror, who is Kang, scientist? Like, let's give everyone a little bit of background about who this Kang person is.
He's just like basics. He's a scientist that tapped into like spatial and time physics, and then tapped into the multiverse, and then realized there's other versions of him doing the same, and then eventually running into negative variants of himself, and then having to fight those, and then the comics are very complicated. They have many versions of him. The original one is a positive one, and then the Conqueror, there's like one that went back in time to Egypt and became a pharaoh, and drove the Sphinx as a vehicle there, and then parked it. And there's like a lot of like him observing variant timelines of himself, and then making a decision to change, and then it offshooting with that change in either positive or negative, and then him either still becoming another version that he meets in the future of himself a lot of the times, or having to, or trying to go against it, and then his new form of destiny. So yeah. So interesting person. And the negative ones are invading multiverses and then imprinting on them. with his will. So
Yeah, exactly. Like I thought he was just like a negative character, but it's not. He had both the good and the negative. And when he like made his appearance there, he was explaining like why they pruned those timelines to get to the end of time, which is where they were, and then decisions that Loki and Sylvie made changed things to allow all of these timelines to open up and grow. They were pruned before, and then all of a sudden they just opened up, like it looked like, you know, ice coming out on a window pane, or synapses of a brain all of a sudden being flatlined, all of a sudden like opening up to all these different possibilities.
yeah, what do you think of that concept of the pruning? Because it's like he made it sound like it had to happen, otherwise it would be chaos, and which I think is like cop out, and like it's not. He's like, oh, I looked at all the methods and time and nothing worked, and this is what I had to do. Oh, what a way to try to convince people, a very elitist agenda. Like, oh yeah, it's like the reason allowing evil, you know, to run what it will prevent worse evils from taking the thing. Well, let's not stop that from us finding a better solution for the system of evil and power and replacing it with good.
Exactly. And then staying on the golden timeline. And yeah, you can make decisions that are negative decisions, but why always try to keep yourself on the right path, and always being able to make those right decisions.
What do you think of the pruning thing? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then two, you can also learn from the mistakes that you've made in other timelines that wound up being collapsed and so forth. Because I believe we're also going through this particular time where timelines, reality bubbles, however you want to put it, are also they're collapsing and merging, and we're kind of, to me, where the goal is to go forward and upwards, like best timeline potentials all the time.
Yeah, and then like the natural path was to allow the branching off. So like the universe was wanting to branch off. He didn't say anything about that. And then so like if that's freedom versus his control. So I prefer freedom, and he says like, oh well, you get chaos. Chaos is not the worst thing ever, and like a balance of order and chaos is necessary to maintain things. And like certain reasons, every a life is spawned to be good caretakers of things. But if you just prune everything and are afraid of every variant of your of the world, it doesn't seem to pan out really with what we see it in real life. What do you think of the concept of how he is pruning all alternate timelines? Do you think that's necessary?
No, I hope it's not necessary. I think from his like scientific point of view, that was the only way that he saw how things could progress. But yeah, I don't believe there should be that much control over it, especially by one person. And what is this person's agenda? Like they might think they're doing the right thing, but that's their idea of what the right thing is. Yeah. And then the deception, it was all like the time variance authority and those 3 androids, like it was all based on a deception. And anytime you're basing something on a deception, you're already starting off on the wrong path. So,
right. So a lot of excuses and like cutting corners and mind control and abusing people and like, oh yeah, I had to do negative things to do good. Oh really? Okay. Well, okay, let's say you had to do that or whatever, hypothetical, like, and then, okay, you just got to do that forever and just do limited to just that timeline. What's the purpose of why time wants to branch off? Like you've explained in other episodes with the Mandela Effect and like the cultivating of the garden. Right. And they don't just last forever. They have a purpose. And then when they meet that purpose, they like they have the part of it that like culminates back to the main timeline that's being perceived for a grand purpose. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Like it's a flower garden of possibilities. And yeah, the concept too that Earth will even plant flowers for you for even timelines that you may not have imagined that you can still learn from. So yeah, the whole concept of learning and growing and progressing, and then ultimately making the best decisions so that you don't have to have another power, another source, prune them and make the decisions for you. It's all a big learning experience.
Yeah, and like going into solutions, his main purpose for doing it was stopping negative versions of himself that he made sound all scary and stuff. Like going into chaos and all that, which, like, I mean, he probably knows what they want to do because he is them, and then going into his own psychology and him like believing what he would do if he was evil. And okay, uh, so he's ultimately just afraid of himself and like him accessing more multidimensional tech. So it's like, oh, a little bit selfish because he's going past just controlling himself, controlling all of time, and then thinking that's the solution. Okay, so let's say that he was like, if he was tapped into more spiritual interactions of his own tree of light of all his incarnations, including his multidimensional and multiple timeline versions of himself, he would be able to find the core and the crux of what would cause those variants to become evil and change the psychology. Like I've done this with myself. I've run into negative versions of myself in spirit that have been attacking me, and like have been like they get mind controlled and targeted by some negative force that doesn't like me, and then is playing the long-term chess game and is corrupting them over time in that timeline variation. And then it gets whispered in the ear like, oh, this version of them is a threat to them, and then they start attacking me in some way. And then I track it back, and I'm like, oh, why are you like, if I thought, because like in the beginning I wouldn't be able to instantly see that it was a version of myself, because it was strategic. It would send a bunch of other stuff at me, and I'd have to like go down the line to figure out what the apex predator was, and then I would read its spirit and like, oh, it's a version of me, shit. And then then like figure out and then track back, why is that, and then where did that come from, where did that branch off of? Was it like a timeline variation that was similar to this one, or was it a wildly different one in like incarnational phases? Like if the timeline change was way back in time at like a crux point of like when a civilization collapsed, or like Atlantis or Rome or whatever, and then everything after that point was wildly different than what we're experiencing now, then there could be a lot of sway into that. But so every point of this of time outside of what I'm perceiving, for anyone that's doing this, is not set in stone. And what you'd be getting coming in is like what's trying to exist and is asking for attention. If somebody is getting targeted in all their timeline variations, like some predator that's getting them to fight one, that's what Kang is dealing with. Something is attacking him to get all his versions of himself attacking themselves, ultimately lessening his capability in the multiverse and distracting him with himself, is ultimately what I'm finding, if that was to apply to real. And so, because otherwise, if he got all of himself in alignment, in order, in unity, then he would have a grand effect to protect, or whatever he would do if he wants to be a caretaker or a force for good. So he's letting it corrupt in his spirit, and then he's like, okay, I'm allowing myself to continue doing evil in the what he perceives as good intention, which the road to hell is paved with good intention. So right. Elites all out there that think you're doing good for the timeline by ultimately doing evil, like whatever depopulation or whatever they're doing, you're listening to a lot of mind control that is not getting to the core of like what things can do, or why we're here, or why numbers of expansion of ourselves for the universe, in like what we're lacking, because you're only perceiving what we are now, and that's a state of being as a species that's been held back to its lowest potential, lowest ability to thrive, to invent, to be creative, that's constantly in survival mode, because things at the top are afraid that they'll lose control. So they have to put us in fear all the time, which limits us to that, and then limits us to what they project onto us based on their consciousness of what they would do, even though not everyone thinks like them. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's like, as I'm listening to you, I'm trying to like process everything that you're saying, and this goes deep. Like this is deep information, and just the fact that it's being attempted to be explained with the timelines and the pruning concept, and even at the very end of this episode. Okay, so you got Loki and you got Sylvie, right? And well, spoiler alert, as soon as like they kissed, I was like, finally. but she's still like, the way I interpreted it, she still didn't trust him. Like the trust wasn't there. So she was actually able to kick him out, so to speak, and pushed him into another timeline, going back to into the TVA. And it was really interesting because in that particular timeline that she pushed him into, he was at the TVA and the officers were there, but nobody knew who he was. And he was trying to explain what just happened in the future. And people are like, who are you? And meanwhile, like, they have all these alerts coming up on their screen about all these timelines branching off and everything's going crazy. And Loki's trying to explain what's going on. And people are like, get out of our way. You don't, who are you? So yeah, it just, so they put him into a timeline where it was a completely different thing. Like, they didn't know who he was. So it gets complicated. It gets really it's so complicated. But at least it's concepts that are starting to come into our mind about how these timelines could actually work. So that if you're familiar with X, Y, and Z in a certain timeline, and all of a sudden you find yourself on another one, like a Mandela effect, like, I don't remember that. Yeah, you're now in another timeline. So with little bits and pieces, we all start to, like, the synapses in our brain all start to, like, form answers and solutions as to how this reality is working. So
yeah, exactly. Love that you went into that. Yeah, then that brings up the concept that even the time variant authority, or the timekeeper, whatever you want to go into, whatever group maintaining the timeline, there are different versions of them, and
there you go, too.
Points they've gone through. And so there would be, like, different motivations that are trying to take them in different directions, and based on the tug of war of that, they would branch off into different motivations or states of being. So then there'd be like, okay, what goal do we have? If we were going into the version that's actually real, or whatever we want to go into. So a human thing that, like, went off the offshoot of Tesla temporal vortal technology, time travel, Project Pegasus, Looking Glass tech, chronovision, all that, and, like, what that leads to in beings that are able to see through time and maintain it, and then that going into a collective that is probably paid for by groups of elite, or whatever you want to go into. And then what, because they're not exactly wanting to have the best possible timeline, like golden timeline, but like things where they maintain control, and then deviations and rebellions from that. And then what we ultimately want as a collective, which is the golden timeline. And because they're necessary, because it's like taking control away from those that want to maintain our timeline, out of the morals, motivations, and direction that humanity wants to take in. So it's at least in the realm of what humanity wants, at least. And then branching off to where the individuals in that go into a rebellion and then take it for actual unity is one of the variations that's possible. I'm reading at least 20 for the real one. And then the wars inside, which is, it's not all like solidified. There's a lot going on. It's fairly complicated. Which variation are you tuning into?
Right. Yeah, and then there's the whole concept is there an end of time? So if we call our experience, like I call it the Earth game, so to speak, does the game actually end at some point? Like, is there a finish to the game, or does it just keep going and going and going? And they explore the concept that there actually is a end of time, or what people call a graduation point. do you have any like thoughts about like an actual, like, will this game end at some point into the far distant future, or does it just keep playing out?
That's a good question. So I go into scales of concepts and territories and destruction events, and when all the players decide to leave or the creations fail in their continuation, or the next creation after it, which would there kind of is like you can perceive stuff like that. It's mostly like the ends and the tips of the trees as they expand. They're
Right.
constantly expanding. And then those that even have the perception to see that, it's not set in stone, and there's many variations of it, though they'll have like a common theme of where it ultimately leads, and having to do with the destruction and transition of a lot of the systems and the star, all the stars going out kind of thing. And then the greater expansion of the universe, and then where we would lead to if it resolved all its goals, and then what would be the next playground that all the spirits want to go to. Though, seeing as that can change, it can at any point be delayed or made grander or continuation, but it has anchorages that beings could travel to at any moment. If you know, so why would some people want to like look at events, so like if you're an advanced time traveler, like, oh, let's go to the end of time and see what it looks like.
Yeah, and then can you go, well, linear time, it doesn't really exist. All time is existing at the same time, but then there's also the concept is like, can you actually heal timelines that didn't need to happen a certain way? And one of the things that came to me, I talked about it on another podcast. I don't know if it was this one or another show I did with somebody, but I think it was this one. We talked about like the Ramses II, and like how there was a certain timeline that I remember that I feel now we're in a healed timeline. Like he died a younger person, younger man, and it wasn't a good timeline, but now he dies of old age. So can you actually go back and heal those other timelines, or can we observe that other beings have healed those other timelines to make it like a better outcome, like self-pruning kind of a thing? It didn't, like those variants didn't need to happen. So let's keep things better, so that as we keep progressing through time, we just get the better and better outcome.
Right? Can you imagine if we were like in the chair and he was trying to explain that circular argument to us, and then like, oh, I saw all these perceptions and this is the only way out, a king, and like we'd be like, oh really? It's like, what have you tried healing your versions of yourself, and then working on internal psychological stuff of why you have evil aspects, and then healing the evil within, and then like, okay, what, because there's like most evil stems from ignorance, and also like a need to control and external factors. So it'd go into like them not having control in themselves, as well as not like going into a lot of it's looking for divine order. Like if you want a golden timeline concept, it goes into wanting divine order and things, justice, divine love, where like loves can actually find each other and they're not like separated because of
right.
People with a power trip decide that's dangerous for their situation on the timeline if all the powerful love couples find each other. Law, like in complete balance, cause and effect and occurrence into where it should be and what it needs to be, divine and universal harmony, the values of equity and equality and safety, for the fortress around different planes of reality where they feel safe and protected, to where they can go into their divinity within and shine it without having to worry about parasites coming at them. Good management, unity, and peace. Like it's like, oh, do we have any of that? We have a certain amount of divine order. We had a lot more in my perspective. This is my perspective. And like people that go into Buddhism will be like, everything's a divine order. I kind of agree with that. And I think you got to meditate to make that within yourself, so that like everything emanating off you is in divine order and knowingness and perception, and then letting go of it all, the illusion, the Maya, and I agree with that. But there's also the missions of the collective consciousness of humanity, Earth, and when they've gained wounds from things like the fall of Atlantis and older civilizations, things invaded in and are messing with that. And I mean, evil is necessary to prove, it's for good to prove its purity. But like in the scaling of that, I mean, all those things can get like wrecked by evil, and then it ultimately being a greater challenge for good to overcome. But and that kind of being in the flow of things. But
yeah, because I'll just add to the complication. I'll bring up the concept of the antiverse, right? So we're talking about all those different timelines and everything, you know, happening in this universe, et cetera. And then there's the whole concept of the antiverse. And I mention that because I'm getting into that with when I'm doing the information I'm putting forward about Atlantis, that there was a concept known as the antiverse, which was responsible for one of the cataclysms. And again, like it just adds to the intrigue of what the truth is of the reality around us. So I don't know if you have any more last minute thoughts, but I thought we'd go on to like another slide, unless there's anything you want to add more about Kang. I do want to add that I heard that Loki got renewed for another season. So at some point in the next couple of years, there's going to be more Loki and Lady Loki stuff going on. And I think Kang the Conqueror, I think he's going to probably have his own, he better have his own series at this point.
Probably, yeah, you know, money.
Yeah, exactly. And then is it starting this week or next week is the Black Widow one?
Oh, well, we can, I mean,
is that soon?
It's already out. Like we can watch it whenever.
Okay. Yeah, because we'll watch that and see if there's any soft disclosure with Black Widow. There's probably a different kind of soft disclosure, but that's, you know, it could be very interesting to talk about what's in there too.
Yeah, and anyone in the chat, let us know if you think we should watch something soft disclosure or like concepts you want us to go into. You know, we might or write it down for later and we'll look into it.
Yeah, I was scanning through somebody said the movie 12 Monkeys, which that was a while ago, but I can't remember what it was about, but I know that there's definitely soft disclosure. I think Bruce Willis was in that movie.
Are there monkeys in it?
There might be 12. Maybe 11. I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Okay, so let's go on to a lighter subject: Migaloo and Iceberg. So it's really interesting about how these types of animals are appearing on the timeline for us, because obviously I never heard of the most famous whale of all time, Migaloo, who was first spotted in 1991. And Migaloo's a thing. I had no idea. So to me, Migaloo is a big Mandela effect. I didn't know that humpback whales could be white. I mean, maybe, but even the story with Moby Dick, I think he had white on him, but he wasn't totally white. And then recently, to add to the drama of the white mammals in the ocean, is Iceberg, who is considered a white killer whale or a white orca. When I see him, he looks white and gold to me. So, and people have known about Iceberg since the year 2010. And now there have been additional like white humpback whales spotted. And so they're saying that Migaloo and Iceberg have like families and, you know, they've had offspring and so forth. So having these white and golden animals appear that are new to a lot of people, I think are pretty dramatic. And so when we read into these white animals, Sean, like I think one of the things that we get back are that they're super protectors, right?
Yeah, let me know what you tune into. I'm reading a lot of stuff. Yeah, there'll be a special spirit that initiated a DNA change in their like pigment to give a flag of difference and reverence. Sometimes that crosses into the animal kingdom, but like, you know, into the sentient species at least. So every one of them should be taken note of as having like a interesting quality to them, and to be left alone as like a sacred addition to the reality, whether it be protector roles or caretaker or whatever. With the humpback whale, I'm reading like some of its bigger aspects that are interesting and different would be like caretaker for the planet, a grand spiritual birther,
Ooh.
like it seems to direct manifest spiritual beings in its entourage to be part of the planet that protect the oceans at a fairly good pace. And then it's a fairy blah, 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 like fairy souls, like a ship, like it brings them here. So it has
okay.
So it has bilocated selves that link with other places, realms, mostly around the planet, like different realms in the planet, and immigration, and then even like has links in its spirit off planet to other, ocean worlds or whatever it would be exploring, and then having a quick way for them to transfer or immigrate from world to world, and it'd be like a big hub for that. For what was the other one called? The killer one?
Yeah, Iceberg the Orca.
That's cool. I like that name.
Yeah, Iceberg, right?
I'm reading for them. They're good at hunting, so like bounty hunting beings that have been offenders, that are like stealing, like parasitic consciousness, and then hunting them down, capturing them, and then is also engaged in a big commerce network trading system, and that people can trade. Mostly it's trading, like after it hunted the beings stole a bunch of that it's hunting, usually have stolen things from other people in parasitic consciousness. It steals energy and parts and abilities and things from beings. And so the killer whale hunts that down and then captures all their stuff, and then starts trading and commercing and seeking out the beings that the parts belong to, and then that being its growth and commerce network of giving that back to the beings that it's supposed to be with. Like, like I kind of, went after this being. Can you, give me a little tip? All that.
Yeah. So, and what you're saying is like, I love what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. And just to clarify, we're not just talking about other orca whales, but it could be like anything, right? Any kind of species, even a human that's had their gifts stolen from them, and taken because a lot of times when we're born, like we have these gifts, and it's kind of like you're born with gifts, but you don't even know that you have them. Like they're unopened presents under the Christmas tree that you've never gotten to. But there are other beings that look for people that have gifts, and they'll take them. So, and then for something like Iceberg to go help us get them back and get those pieces back to us, I love that concept.
Yeah. So people listening now, Iceberg has a radius and it's expanding it as it grows. So it'll probably expand it past it, and with the show, it'll probably grow it quite a bit. It seems to have expanded its radius to the entire planet of this realm, so it can hunt down beings anywhere on the planet. And if it gets bounty enough and reward enough, it will pick and choose which ones to focus on in the period of time. So if you go to it spiritually, asking, "Oh, can you help me get my parts back?" and it's you give it equal value trade for what it's going to be facing, then it can help you get those parts back.
Yeah, isn't it great that like we've got Migaloo and Iceberg on the timeline now, especially Iceberg to help get parts back? Like, yeah, there's just so many things like this about our reality that people like. It's going to be like more common. I know it's going to be more common knowledge in the future, but right now we're talking fringe, and it's kind of cool. I like this. It's really great. All right, so this next slide is a little this is a little dark, but you were telling me about this last night, and I had never heard of what this concept was of a Judas goat. And we do have, it's like a 1-minute video that we have queued up. So let's watch the video and then we'll talk about it. And people can see if other people have heard of Judas Goats before. So let's watch that video and then we'll talk more about it.
Artie?
What is it?
A Judas goat. Didn't you ever see one?
No, what does it do?
Watch and you'll find out. See, when they get to the slaughterhouse, he ducks to one side and the silly sheep go in to get their throats cut. That black devil knows it.
Did you get rid of the typewriter?
Uh-huh. There's a pit out back where they bury all the entrails. Nobody will go near that. So, how did you make out?
Oh, fun.
I think
Pretty
that's,
smug
we
about
probably
it.
could end the movie there.
But
in
if
the
you did, how
scene
come
there.
you're not sweating? Like after Paulie. And after you found out about those
Because now it's getting
class.
into like part of what this
Yeah.
movie is about. But
Yeah.
okay, yeah, good, yeah. So, Sean, what's a Judas goat?
They train a goat to with one job, which is to deceptively, because sheep have an instinct to follow other sheep, to lead them to the slaughterhouse, and then it ducks out at the last bit. And yeah, they lead it into, or they can even use them to lead them to other sections to easily, without trauma, like in auctions and stuff, to lead them to the next room. And yeah, it's like a big thing in aspects of programming society, like what is it? The Piper that like has the rats follow them, or the
Right.
people that deceive and they have them. Oh yeah, follow me. I have all the answers, and then they lead them to a really crappy situation or future, or the deception ultimately.
Yeah, and I guess it's called a Judas goat because it's named after Judas Iscariot in the Bible, who allegedly was the one that betrayed Jesus. And then, like, there's so many things about the Bible that I think are going to be like straightened out, so to speak. So even this whole concept of like who really was Judas Iscariot, because when I read into it, I get like a little bit of different information. So you talk about like, in the Bible, it basically says that Mary Magdalene, for example, was a prostitute. I don't think that's the case at all. Like a high priestess, like very beautiful, sacred woman. And I believe that her and Jesus actually had children. Like there's that whole story and that whole thing. And I also believe that Judas was not who the Bible makes him out to be. I think he had a different role that was very positive, that maybe perhaps the church didn't like what he did. And maybe I was getting that he almost looked like Jesus, and somehow he was a substitute that the Romans didn't know. So they took him instead. And anyway, this whole story was crafted, and we know that there's changes in the Bible and so forth. But yeah, but this whole concept of this goat, like that, and then I started looking into it more. There's actually Judas steer too. So like for cattle, they'll have like a Judas steer cow or cattle that will lead them off to the slaughter. So yeah, to me, this is like a big Mandela effect. Especially, I grew up on a farm. Grew up next to a dairy farm, and I would have thought I would have come across this at some point in my life, or at least heard the terminology. I never heard the term before. So to me, this was like, oh, this is an interesting Mandela effect for this timeline. Why did this one get inserted? Can you liken it to anything that's going on in today's world where people are being led astray, so to speak? So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of deception in this world. I've said before, we're born into an arena of mind control, the cult of the culture. It's a belief system war, and anyone that thinks they don't hold on to mind control, you're probably one of the most mind controlled, and it stems from the uncomfortability of never wanting to be wrong. It's good to be wrong because you can learn from it. I've been wrong millions of times, and I want to be millions of times more wrong, because then that shows I've breached past veils and seen past illusions and lies and things that are told by external authorities. Take your internal authority above all else, but take everything else with a grain of salt. Use everything as a teacher and keep learning. Don't ever box yourself in. Things will tell you, oh, don't look at that. That's mind control. Oh, that will affect your mind. A lot of that's bull crap, because mind control stems from ignorance and not being able to see past things. So the more different types of variations of wisdom you can get, the more angles you can look at the truth, the more aligned with the truth you are. There's a way to get out of mind control. It's finite. It's parasitic belief. It needs your energy and focus and belief to keep going. So in alignment with knowingness and the truth, if you detach from all belief systems, what remains will be the alignment with the universe in knowingness experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So like Judas Goat concept, yeah, keep hold of that, because you'll see a lot of that in a lot of people that claim to be external authorities and then tell you what to do. And like if you question them, then they'll get angry, and then
right.
Like the science. Oh, believe the science. It will. If you're not allowed to question, it's not science. It's not to know. It doesn't hold up to scientific inquiry. So
exactly.
Yeah. It's mind control, scientism. And then there's other religions, like that boxing, because religare is the etymology for religion, to tie back or hold or bind. Different from spirituality and free will. Take the Bible's got a lot of wisdom. It's got a lot of codex knowledge. It's got all these symbologies and things in it. And it's not the original thing, though it still has wisdom. Yeah, like with Judas, I've heard a lot of different things. And Mary Magdalene, going in that, yeah, I don't think she was a whore at all. Magdalene means watchtower of the flock. It goes into that she had her own mystery school thing going on. If you go into the seen belief of Yahshua Emmanuel and Jesus Christ concept, and the mystery schools that taught him as he went around in the missing time period that is talked about in the Bible, and where he went after the resurrection or whatever, because that's even up to scrutiny too. With was he and why is he becoming a scapegoat for everyone's sins, as scapegoat ritual in old Judaism, so people can wash themselves of sin. Whatever people believe, keep doing it. Just keep going and keep digging deeper. You have a purpose for why you exist and what you believe. So keep on trucking on, all in unity, and we don't have to be divided by it. And to find what is ultimately truth is the goal, not to just want to prove our previously held belief. Right?
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to what you're saying too. Is sometimes things are right in front of us and we don't realize it. So you take the word government, right? If you break that down into the Latin, govern means to control, and mente in Latin means mind. So right off the bat, government means mind control. So you're given the clues all the time. And even in our last episode, I think the moral of the story was always audit, always verify, always make sure the information you're getting, look at it in different angles, look at it in different ways, and just always question. And if you're not allowed to question, it's not science, it's propaganda. You have to be allowed to question. End of story. And you question, and let's say you're wrong. Good, you're proven wrong, but why couldn't you even be allowed to question? So yeah, these are some of the things.
Danger to our democracy.
Oh boy, I know. All right, let's go on to the solar system. Our next slide is to me, this is a Mandela effect. A lot of people of course I know there's 13 planets in the solar system. To me it was new. We have our 8 classical planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, and Uranus. Well, I forgot to put that in there. And then we have 5 dwarf planets that I didn't know about, including Ceres, Pluto, Eris, Hamau, I don't even know how to pronounce it, and Maki Maki, which I thought I had at the restaurant the other night. Isn't that a kind of fish? Oh, that's Mahi Mahi. Okay.
Where's Sneezy and Grumpy?
I know. But and the planet Ceres was discovered in 1801. It's in the asteroid belt, and it was classified as a planet in the year 2006, and it's geologically active. It actually has ice volcanoes on it. And to me, it's like I thought I knew the basics about the solar system, and I'm always surprised to learn whether it's how many moons Jupiter now. I think Jupiter has up to 80 moons now. Or the moon is within Earth's orbit. And I've heard people talk about that as a Mandela effect in the past. But for me, what just changed is now Earth's atmosphere, I said orbit. Earth's atmosphere is now known to be 2 lunar distances above the Earth. So before it was like, oh, the moon was always outside the atmosphere. And then I heard the Mandela effect, well, the Earth is inside the Earth's atmosphere. And now it's well inside the Earth's atmosphere of 2 lunar distances. So the more that you hear about what's going on in the solar system, it's like, wow, like that, I wasn't taught that. So I don't know if you have any comments about these planets, but I just wanted to throw it out there because I thought it was pretty cool about all these extra planets that I just was never, I think I should have known about them, especially they've all been discovered at least 10 years ago.
Right? Like what the heck is America doing with just keeping it at 9? Is like, oh, it's a dwarf. We don't talk about dwarfs. We're dwarfists. Or because they want to do some type of ritual with 9 or 8 or whatever. Whatever. And I've also heard in the UK they like acknowledge about 17 planets plus dwarfs and stuff, and then there's other objects and other asteroid belts they don't want to talk about. But I'm going with there's a lot more things than they've discovered out there that are interesting and have purposes. But it'd be cool to discover them all.
Yeah, and actually one of the latest things that they've discovered, or they found the evidence for it a few years ago, but they just have pieces together now. The largest comet in the solar system kind of has a Mandela effect name. It's got Berenstein in the name. I'm like, oh, Comet Bernoulli Berenstein. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's the largest comet in the solar system, and it's coming out of the Oort cloud, which is on the very fringes of the solar system. It's not going to come near Earth. I think it's going to go out by Saturn. But wow, like a huge comet that's been recently discovered. It has a Mandela effect name already inside of it, which I like. I think that's pretty cool. But there's just so much about what's going on around us that we just have never known yet. And what are the meanings? Maybe at another show we'll read into that comet, the Berenstein-Bears comet. I'll call it the Berenstein-Bears comet.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
People like those. They like space weather, so that'll be good.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to our final slide. Our final.
Sure. And did you want to answer a little bit of the questions after that too?
Yeah, if we have time, we'll answer some questions. Yeah, that sounds good. So this final slide is about the Dale. This car called the Dale, which I found out about it because there's this channel on YouTube called The History Guy. And I'll scan through his channel, look at all the titles of his stuff. And every time something pops up new that I've never seen before, especially from an episode of 2017 and 2018 episodes seem to be very interesting occurrences for me to spot Mandela effects. So he had this one episode about the Dale car. And I'm watching it and I'm like, what? The Dale car? Like, now I was a kid in the 70s and I remember the gas shortages. I remember sitting in the front seat of my grandfather's car and, certain days, like if your license plate started with a certain number, you could line up at the gas station and always the lines would last for hours and you have to turn off. Between turning on and off the car, I think they probably burned more gas throughout the whole time. But this was a big thing. They called it the con of the century. And so when I first found out about this, I asked my father, I'm like, because my father's like really big into cars and so forth. In the 70s was his era. And he didn't know what I was talking about. I'm like, you never heard of the Dale? He's like, Chris, what the heck is the Dale? Like it was that 3-wheeled car that gets 70 miles to the gallon that was going to change, the whole motor industry. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So what we have queued up are like 2 segments that I want to just play for everyone. One's from the history guy, and the other is from HBO. It's the trailer for a show called A Lady in the Dale that came out earlier this year that I never heard of. And I've been like paying attention, like I'm on the HBO email list ever since I was on the John Wilson show. I'm like, I get all the HBO emails of things that are coming up in like shows and so forth. I must have missed this. I think it came out in January, February of this year. I missed this one for whatever reason, unless it's a
sequel to The Lady and the Tramp.
Yeah, well, when you watch this, it'll make sense. So there's about 2 minutes from the history guy thing I want people to watch, and then we're going to watch the HBO trailer, and it'll start like adding into what we're talking about and what's going on with this. So let's queue up the one for the history guy first, and then we'll pause, talk about that briefly, and then we'll watch the HBO trailer. It was I think a 6-episode or 3-episode HBO show, but.
Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael was a widowed mother of 5. Her husband had been a NASA engineer, and she had degrees in marketing and engineering. Having grown up on a farm in Indiana, she had been working on automobiles her entire life. She had a passion for car designs, and in Cliff's car, she saw an opportunity to turn the Detroit auto industry on its ear. She offered to develop and manufacture a car based on Cliff's design, promising him millions of dollars in royalties once the car started selling. Carmichael incorporated the 20th Century Motor Car Corporation. She started raising money from investors, opened a headquarters in Encino, and leased warehouse space in Burbank to start a factory. She decided to name the car after its designer, Dale Clift, calling the new car the Dale. The Dale was billed as the world's first space-age vehicle. The 3-wheel design would reduce the weight, as would the construction, with a body made of strong but lightweight rocket structural resin. The 2-seat car would only weigh 1,000 pounds, allowing the 2-stroke BMW motorcycle engine in the back to push it up to 85 miles per hour and get an astounding 70 miles to the gallon. The low center of gravity at the center of the triangle made it virtually impossible to roll over, despite the 3-wheel design. And the resin was stronger than steel, and as it was molded in color, would not show scratches. Designed for efficiency, it was to operate without wires, with dashboard instruments like the speedometer and the radio plugging directly into a circuit board. All this would come at a very low price, with the 2-seater retailing at just $2,000. Dollar for dollar, Carmichael boasted, the Dale was the best car ever built. The design won rave reviews from the media. Carmichael was profiled in People magazine. One Memphis newspaper raved in November of 1974 that it just may be the car of the century. A prototype was shown at the 1975 Los Angeles Auto Show, and the car was featured as a showcase prize on the game show The Price is Right. Plans for a 4-seat coupe and a station wagon were also unveiled. Having raised nearly $30 million in investment, Carmichael hoped to start producing cars as early as June of 1975.
Okay, so now that's just a setup for the car itself, right? It doesn't end there. This story goes crazy. Like the car is one thing, right? And then the whole background about what really happened with this car. This being such a big scandal, like I know I would have heard of this. So for one more thing, let's so that you know what I'm talking about. Let's watch the HBO trailer for their series. It's called A Lady in the Dale. And then that'll paint the rest of the picture about this whole crazy story.
And now here's the ultimate, a 3-wheeled car. It's the Dale, a whole new concept in automotive design.
Elizabeth Carmichael was way ahead of her time.
Our biggest problem will be keeping up with demand.
My mother was my hero. This was going to be the answer to America's gas problem.
I'm coming down, 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 down. Do you think you're going to be able to take on GM?
We're gonna whip GM.
I thought this was the beginning of a real life, a normal life. But my secret self was wondering when it was going to end.
There was so much cloak and dagger going on.
When they couldn't decide if the car was real, they started focusing on Liz.
Things started to fall apart. Someone started shooting.
There's so much to say about my mother. How long you got?
I don't want to sound like an egomaniac, but I'm a genius.
Okay, but here's the thing. She wasn't a woman. She was a man. She was transgender. So to add everything to this whole story about the car of the century that was going to change automotive history, the woman behind it was not a woman. And if you watch the HBO series, like she goes to court, she represents herself, and it comes out that she's a man, which is like, I know I would have heard about this. I don't. If this is new for anyone else in the chat, let me know, because I know I would have heard about this. I know growing up as a kid, like my grandmother, like watching Liberace, and like there was like this kind of talk was like hot. Like this was like hot talk. Would have been a National Enquirer, and et cetera. And I remember too, my grandmother would get the National Enquirer, and I'd always like look at the headlines as a kid and be like, "Oh, what's going on now with Liberace, or what's going on with this or that?" So this thing blew my mind, because the more I got into it, and the more that I learned about Elizabeth Carmichael, whose real name was Jerry Michael. It's the most amazing story. It's really the most amazing story. So I just had to share this with everyone. And I think, do we have one more? I think we might have one more video queued up from the history guy. If we don't, that's okay.
So
okay,
yeah.
I'll just explain what it is. But there's another. So what happens is there's this is the court case of the century, right? What happens is Jerry or Elizabeth, however you want it, whatever name you want to use, goes to appeal the decision that's made. And so while it's under appeal, she skips bail and she disappears, and they can't find her for 9 years. She's missing. Guess what happened? Guess where they find her? They find her in Texas because of a show called Unsolved Mysteries. So she was like on this famous show called Unsolved Mysteries. They locate her, and guess what town she's hiding out in?
Where?
Dale, Texas. She's hiding out in Dale. So
that's where I'll hide.
It's just this like boom, boom, boom. It's like, yeah. So this is a very super interesting Mandela effect. Now this is probably too young for you, Sean. This may not have, may not resonate with you as much as it did with me, or anybody that's older like I am. But this is like crazy.
So she skipped bail, and they just found her on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah,
they were like, "Oh, let's go to Dale, Texas. So maybe she'll be there."
Somebody saw the episode in Dale, Texas, and I don't know if they identified her as a man or a woman, but they figured out who she was, and and yeah. So there you go. The Mandela effects, they go from like interesting, like stovetop stuffing, Berenstein Bears, so that's interesting. Mirror, mirror on the wall goes to magic mirror, and now it goes like to really stuff that we should have heard about, but we didn't.
So what? She just like scammed a bunch of people to like invest in a car, and then never made the car.
Yes, what they found was that like at the car shows, somebody actually lifted up the lid where the engine was, and they found out that the engine was just like a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine, and then the wheels were actually like screwed into the side of the chassis, like if they weren't really real, they wouldn't actually move. So when they on closer investigation, but it caught people's imagination, because even that little car, was the Gremlin that got 22 miles to the gallon, was like, oh, that was a really big deal. This car got 70, and you're not going to fit a lot of cargo in that car.
So they just made that up.
Yeah, it turned out to be like
it's 70 now.
there was
like the news articles just go along with it. Jeez.
Yeah, so it was just like, it just like blew my mind, and it's a fun story, and it's like intrigue and this and that. So I wanted
The
to
media can take people for a complete loop, and they don't even check their stuff.
Yeah, I think it just caught so many people's imagination that they were like, wow, this is going to be the answer to the fuel. And people during the gas crisis of the 70s, that was a big thing. Like, people were really stressing out over that, especially in their Cadillacs that got like 6 miles to the gallon, and gas back then goes to like $4 a gallon, whatever it was. That was a big deal back then.
Yeah, good thing we're in the future where we don't have to worry about gas or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly, right? 50 years later, we're still doing that. And then there's the whole concept. I'm just going to say one more thing because, as the quantum businessman, I'll say this, but so like, I love the idea of electric cars, right? Who doesn't like the whole thought of a Tesla? There's no fossil fuels being used, but there's another side to that people should know about. In that,
I especially love the child labor in the coal mines and lithium mines. That's the best part.
Well, the thing is,
but we'll eventually move past. That's fine.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that people need to realize they're sitting in a Tesla. You're sitting in a giant battery, and I found all this stuff online about people allegedly coming down with weird cancers after they've owned their Tesla for a couple of years, and like that never makes the headlines. Like those type of things never do. But I think it's something that we should be cautious about. It's like another angle of looking at things, that because the media is not covering that doesn't mean that it's not possible. And is it safe to be sitting like in a giant cell phone? That's so people should like look at alternatives, like look at all the angles to something. So something that might appear to be really beneficial may have some other negative benefits or negative things that should be examined as well, besides what's just on the surface.
Oh yeah, we need to go into green technology and like all these stories about like radioactive or like emissions from electromagnetic generators, these smart technologies and things like that. They don't actually read or look into the effect of it on the human body, amplification of cancer or illness, and yeah, they don't want to talk about that because there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and I like the whole concept of the hybrid airships. I like the concept of anti-gravity, like that. We don't really talk about that a lot. You don't need rubber tires anymore, and that's a whole other way of transport. Like, I believe in the future there's going to be all kinds of really cool stuff that's finally going to come out. So I'm excited about the future. It's going to put us in a whole direction that we're not even anticipating, or not enough of us are anticipating yet, but we will be.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of advanced technologies, like scientific hijack corporate skepticism will be like, oh, there's no perpetual energy, even though there's like generators that are constantly turning each other now, and all you got to do is the right angles of magnets together and using gravity in the right way to like get it in perpetual propulsion. It's not like a woo thing. It's real. I got like playlists of this stuff, but government doesn't want that because they want an industry that they can keep making money off of, like the oil industry. And big oil is like a big buying up a lot of these patents and then putting them on shelves and stuff. And like, yeah, and I'm like, oh no, I'm so disappointed because like you made me not want to buy a Tesla, and I was gonna buy one with all my Dogecoin.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing. What is, like, we're in a hologram. I believe we're in a hologram. Okay, it's electric, it's magnetic. Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. And when we start understanding what we are and what is actually around us, and the things that the Tartarians tapped into, right, into the generating power from the ether, so to speak, with their amazing architecture and so forth.
Cliff Tower and Nicholas Tesla, that got. He's like, we can't make money off of this.
Yeah, exactly. It's free. How can you make money off of free energy? Yeah. So those type of things. As soon as our consciousness can be able to handle that, like we rise to another level. Because right now, like there's things that are obviously against free entertainment. They don't want, there's big business and et cetera.
Kill people.
They will kill people right now. So we have to rise above that. And I believe that our consciousness is in the process of expanding and rising above that. So greed, selfishness, big business, all that stuff is just going to be like, why did we ever do that? Why do we even think that way? For what? Power? To have power over others? Is that really? So I think in the future, the way people have thought in the past, well, like, how could people have thought that? Going to war? Like, really? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. So
exactly.
Yeah, so there we go.
Do you want to go in the comments? We can like go through that.
Yeah, if you can.
Sure. And I guess go off of like for the Kang the Conqueror thing. Don't just prune everyone's timeline.
Yeah,
prune your own, or resolve it, heal it, so that you can bring in all the unity and all the versions of yourself. You can probably heal 99% of the negative versions of yourself, and even the ones that are like too far gone and they're just insane crazy. Then you gotta, that it's your responsibility to bring them to a space of like container or destruction or death or something. If they're harming everyone else, don't just prune all the timelines and just prune everyone. That's not okay. And like, they don't need to interfere with each other. There would be necessary boundaries and quarantines from them interacting with each other. So it'd just be the problem of the ones that can penetrate that bubble, that then want to accumulate power, and then that just takes good management and putting it at the core, which like I do and I'll teach others, so that the multiverse can get into greater divine order. Yeah, and then the Marvel's doing that because they need an excuse to bring Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland together in Spider-Man, which I get it. Yeah, you got to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like as we're talking, I just got I get these space weather alerts. I just got a space weather alert that solar wind is now blowing faster than 600 kilometers a second. So we're getting the effects of some kind of a coronal mass ejection or a coronal hole that's opened. And yeah, the sun is really fascinating. There's a lot of stuff going on with the sun. For people that watch that too, there was a big like explosion on the other side of the sun that happened last week. I think on July 16th or 17th. And I don't know if anyone else had noticed it too, but on those days, I was like looking at the sun as it was setting. There was a good amount of haze. So you can look at the sun and it almost looked like the moon. But I saw like these really fascinating colors coming off the sun. So, and just for people to keep an eye on that, because there's a lot of good things about the sun. The sun is going to give us a lot of good downloads and so forth. And a lot of people are afraid, like, oh, the sun is a problem. But I don't think you could see it that way. Do you think the sun would ever actually hurt the Earth? How do you feel?
Want to? It's constant. It's in a communication with the Earth, so it wants things in divine order. If it hits a blast, it will be a certain place and time, and there'll be a reason for it.
Exactly.
And it can like always hold back. It's been holding most of its like big explosions back because we are infrastructure needs EMF protection before it can just blast us, and the blasts are evolutionary based. So like projective and the Earth receptive, and our DNA in between to interact with them both in yin and yang quality.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's cool. Yeah, and keep updating. So yeah, do you want to go like through the comments and we can like go through a few of them?
Yeah, I'm scanning what I can see right now, and
go for one you want. I'm looking at the Norn one. It's like, yep, the Norse three Norns of fate, the threads. Yeah, they're real. They have a presence. They're immortal. They're doing a lot. They go through a lot of stuff, so they're a little bit dramatic with some people, but they're pretty interesting. I like them. Definitely don't piss them off.
I don't even see where that question is, but you must be. Did you start scrolling from the top?
Yeah,
okay.
You can start from the bottom if you want. We can meet in the middle.
Okay. Yeah, I saw some comments from Graphcast. Hey, Graph. I did a We did a little show yesterday that's going to be on his channel soon, so definitely watch for that. That was definitely a fun, high energy show that we did. So that would be a good one.
If the Mandela effect is being observed by someone, has that person jumped a timeline? Or if this is true, then why is that person still the same person and is observed by others of the same person all the time? So bodies are, the timeline tries to maintain order by like bleeding over and merging what it can without like changing bodies, or the, like matter has infinite space in between, so like the matter would be like merging together, and then certain memories can overlay with each other and it just be an expansion, and some can be noticeable, non-noticeable. It depends on the point of it, whether the person's trying to remain in a stable timeline of non-interference, or if the more things they notice the better in their stage, then that would be part of it too. And then memory changing would be involved if based on what's the best outcome for them, if it's in divine order, because there's things messing with it too. But yeah, feel free to go into the ones you're reading.
Yeah, I'm just scanning through them. I mean, there's a lot of good questions. Some I don't know some I don't even know what they're. I honestly don't know what people are talking.
Bring them up. Maybe I'll bring up some, and if you feel like answering them too. Midpoint. When someone has nonstop synchronicities, does that mean they are on the right timeline, or do you need to change something? What do you think on that?
I think synchronicity. I think nothing is a coincidence. Like I always thought, like, oh, that's a coincidence. Oh my God, that's a coincidence. I looked at 11:11 again. That's a coincidence. No, like I'm learning that like I don't think there are any coincidences, and I think it's whether you understand the concept or believe the concept of your higher self, your guides and guardians, your spiritual entourage, etc. They're always trying to kind of put you on the right track, so to speak, and like guide you, nudge you a little bit. So. Yeah, that's how I feel about synchronicities and versus coincidences.
Here's another one, good one for you. I think star forts were a way of positively changing water, living water, perhaps an exchange of energy. They're beautiful designs surrounding by water, like Dr. Miyamoto's water has memory. What do you want to say on that?
Yeah, I think, well, now we're talking sacred geometry and those type of things, and how when you vibrate at a certain frequency, it can have an effect. I think I never thought about that, but I think that's I like the concept for sure.
Yeah, I would think that has to be an account of it, especially with the positioning. Besides, like just being a forward and like protecting design, a lot of things like the place of power like to be on water, so they may have just found what's near the water, and it's easier to find too. And then stargates, and then ability to program, like some of the royalty likes to be put their graves on islands or on dragon lines, or surround things with water, and a lot of islands are big place of power. So yeah, I'd go with that too. A lot of good comments. Love it. Thank you, everyone, for doing that.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate the nice comments. And maybe we could like focus on maybe another show. We just answer questions as best we can. Maybe we'll have a couple things prepared, but maybe not as much. And then maybe we could have a topic, like a topic of XYZ, and then ask your questions about that, rather than kind of being all over the place. We'll figure that out.
I hear a good comment that kind of dance around a bit. I wonder if there are any kaiju left alive on Earth. The answer is yes. I will not tell you where. It's not good to go searching for them. They're sleeping. Leave them alone. They're like a defense mechanism. They're doing things on the planet spiritually, in dream, protecting things from a big scale. The good ones, they're also the ones that invaded that are also in dormancy. Around the fall of Atlantis is when they came in.
Yeah.
And it's mostly a chess move against each other to stop. If negative kaiju come online, then they're there to protect them against it, and then that's really the only purpose for them awakening. They do not need to be awakened otherwise. The military do not wake them. That will make a really shitty timeline.
Right, exactly.
Or really dramatic and people will die. It's whatever.
Somebody asked me a question about the Akashic Records. Reading the books that I recommended, and she provides a prayer to reach the records, but it felt strange. Don't do anything that feels strange to you. If it's from the book that I recommended, that was actually my starting point to start to get information from the Akashic Records. And it kind of started off in a really weird way for me too, because I was seeing things and trying to piece together what was going on. And then when I was learning the Akashic Records, part of it was to read other people's Akashic Records. And so I had some interesting situations. Like one of the stories I tell was about, I had to qualify and reach like a certain level for the Akashic Records, you had to like find 10 of your friends / victims whose records you would read. And so I found some friends, and her name is Dina, a good friend Dina, and she asked me a question, and it was about she wanted to know if she had a guardian angel. And this was one of my first time reading someone's records, and I'm like, so I say the prayer and I'm trying to tune into it, and all I can see in my mind's imagination is an angel vacuuming. And I was like, I can't tell Dina this, she's gonna think I'm really crazy. So I just keep seeing the angel vacuuming. So I'm like, Dina, like, I don't know what this means about a guardian angel, but I see this angel and it has a vacuum cleaner and it's vacuuming. And she was like, oh my God, I know exactly what that is. I'm like, you do? And she told me the story when she was a little girl. She was probably in her mid 40s when I was talking to her. But when she was a little girl, like 7 or 8 years old, she was playing by the train tracks. And she's like, my parents told me don't go to the train tracks. I was a kid, I didn't listen. So the train came by at such high speed that by the time that she heard the train, it was like on her, and she felt herself being sucked into the tracks. And then she felt something, as a kid, she described it, something vacuumed her away. And she told everyone, like, my life was saved because something vacuumed me away. So when I told her the story about the angel vacuuming, she got it. And so when you read people's Akashic Records and they ask you a question about X, Y, or Z, you never know what the answer is going to be, but it'll make sense to the person. And it was like, that made me be like, oh my God, there's even more to this than I even thought. So when it comes to the Akashic Records, start off slow. It's really interesting. And like I always say too, like, you want the information to flow into your heart. Like, you don't want it to be from, like, some people might channel another being, for example, to like get it and so forth. You want it to be like more authentic. And then the Akashic Records get kind of interesting, because then it's like, well, whose timeline are you reading? Hopefully it's the same timeline the person's in. But Sean, you're really good at the Akashic Records. What's your advice? We'll probably end the show with this, because we've been here for a long time already. But what is Sean Bond's advice for learning how to read the Akashic Records?
So it's a field of knowing and truth in everything that like links together and has libraries, and there's territories and based on consciousness. The technologies that we inherit is made to be able to access it. Start with your light body memory and reading past lives and DNA memories, and then build upon the technology with what you inherited to make it more accurate. Gain biofeedback and ways to check accuracy, and don't just read stuff with like, oh, it's absolutely true, and just because I know it. Find ways to confirm it and be okay with being wrong, and training it to be better, and then comparing it with other people, and then doing it in solution-based aspects. And if it's getting messed with, it would be mostly because it threatens something that wants to mess with that, or usually like breaking out of prisons or parasitic entanglement or limits and blocks on a person or all the species or planet. So yeah, just push past those and be okay with being wrong, and then get all your wrongs out of the way. It exposes billions of attachments, and then you detach from everything else as you bring into purity. Centering into the heart goes into the super consciousness, as your consciousness centers into the heart, which contains access to everything you've ever learned or known or experienced, and also the akasha. And then it has like a consciousness, so you got to go through school, get it to like you, merge with it, and then a lot of other aspects that we'll be doing in courses later on. And then I see a message that says, how do we go into our gifts? Build safety to do so. Detach from things that want to steal them. A lot of root stuff to get you grounded and strong and protected and resilient, so that you got to have the shield, because you're going to go into a space of cultivating light and tapping into divinity. And when you do that, things are going to want to interfere or tap into it themselves. So you got to have the place of the container to do that. And like the divine masculine feminine concept, and the feminine birthing that new expression as the masculine protects from that. Everyone has it in themselves, those masculine and feminine. And then finding solutions, knowing, seeking. Every problem is a garden for solutions to be born from, and all those are gifts to the world. And then you can master them in yourself and master them for their value to a lot of people, and that will support your timeline in existence if you bring that out to the world.
Cool. Awesome. And I'm just going to add something, go back a little bit to the Akashic Records. One of the things that I began to realize is not just people have Akashic Records, but locations can have a record of like what happened to that location. Even animals can have Akashic records. Your dog or your cat could have its own Akashic records. It may not have been a cat, like it could have been a human in the past. Like, be open to those possibilities, because one time I tried to read the Akashic records of one of my dogs, and I'm like, you're interesting. So yeah, people should definitely like keep an open mind for all these different types of ways of looking at reality. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Expand. Grow.
Exactly.
Don't let anything shape you and put you in a box and, oh no, you can't do that. Oh, science will be the way. Yes, science is to know. Nescience is to not know. Don't let religions box you.
Exactly.
Fringe science is what Nikola Tesla did, and everyone was keeping him and holding him back. We would have flying cars and free energy technology by now if they weren't doing that. They're a detriment to humanity for not allowing the expression. It's good to be skeptical. Always be skeptical. Cynical with an agenda is not what we need.
Exactly. And by the way, as we're talking, like in the background, I have like a window here. I'm looking out the window, and I see the sun that's starting to come down, and like, yeah, I see like rainbows coming off the sun. So I got the solar wind alert. Something's going on with the sun, and I'm pretty psyched about it. Whatever it is, I'm pretty happy about it.
Yeah, we had a rainbow yesterday, and I was like chasing it. I'm like, God, I gotta get a good picture of this.
Oh yeah, where did you read that rainbow went to, Sean?
Yeah. So for people knowing, if you see a rainbow, especially if it's full circle, it depends on. But either way, it usually has a connecting link in light technology to another place. Like it has a portal tech.
Ooh.
And you can even create portal techs through the technology of rainbows yourself if you want, and then program them. Mostly it would be energetic, though people can do. So like the rainbow bridge, that's the concept for, traveling through the realms. So yeah, some of them lead to other realms. And I read it went to Alphine, so the elf realm, and the there's like Fae and other stuff there, and there was like an immigration coming over, so you can like read like what's the purpose of this rainbow, what does it do, what does it mean, and to all those that look upon it, and does upgrade the DNA. Does light change his DNA? And then if it's a portal, then it would be like immigration, and then is it two-way or is it just one-way? And then you can like, is they going out or are they coming in?
Interesting. Wow, rainbows are portals. That's great. All right,
Rainbow Bridge.
The Rainbow Bridge makes sense. All right, everybody, thank you for watching this podcast. Our next one will be either next week or the week after. And yeah, we're having fun with it. Look for my Atlantis series that's going to be coming out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Sean, do you have any last minute things you'd like to add before we close things down?
Audience, you be good. No, I love you all. Thank you for joining us. Spread, share, fly.
Yeah.
Fly. What's the Mandela effect for that? Oh, now.
Yeah, instead of fly, my pretties fly, she just says fly. It just doesn't sound right. Yeah, and so in conclusion, I'll say my famous thing: dream on, dream on, dream on, dream until your
dreams come true.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Until next time.
See you.